I know my neighbor was saying that their dog eats opossums. And so I feel like maybe their dog eats the opossums that has fleas, and then the little baby opossums make their way into our yard, and then my dog eats them or kills them.
Okay, this
and
is
then there's
so
just fleas
disturbing.
everywhere.
So does your neighbor have fleas?
Not sure. Haven't asked.
We should print out flyers and ask all of them, like, if you have fleas.
Have you seen fleas?
If so, please contact.
I know. They're just hard to get rid of.
So you're still getting bit?
No, I haven't gotten bit again. I think what happens is when they come inside, because they sprayed the chemicals, they die. So I found dead ones around.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's just gross. Yeah, it's just overall a disgusting experience.
They need a bubble tent that block.
Yeah, would be lovely. But you know what? We're just here. It's better than it was.
It's just you have doctor appointments talking about do I get brain surgery? And then you're getting bitten by fleas.
And then I'm like, oh, I need to work in this brain conversation around my flea infestation.
Yeah. That's what I want to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
pest control.
Yeah.
So
before we ever had a podcast, I'm an avid podcast listener.
I like how you say before we ever. We've been having a podcast for a long time. It's been 2 months.
Okay, so before we ever had a podcast.
8 weeks ago.
8 weeks ago. I am an avid podcast listener. You know this. I love listening to podcasts, and I have a few people on social media that I follow. And our guest today is one of those people, which is so surreal and crazy. But I've followed her ever since she worked at Refinery 29.
I know you didn't share. You were a secret follower.
Yeah, so I was is
that safe to say?
Yeah, for sure. I think I did mention that to her when I first met her. I'm what do they call them?
A basement.
A lurker.
A lurker.
Yeah, I don't I hadn't subscribed necessarily, but I fully watched all her content.
Yeah.
And I just thought she
and you showed me.
And I showed you. I was she's such a bubbly person. She seems so fun. She is such a curious person. And I just admired her confidence and all these things. So anyways, fast forward, our friend ends up dating someone who happens to be friends with Lucie, we realize, years into the relationship. But again, life goes on, nothing.
Yep.
And then I have brain surgery, and I see this video, and it's Lucie saying that she does one-on-one coaching for people. And I'm just you know what? I'm just gonna ask Deb to introduce me and see what happens, because I can't work and I want to do something meaningful, and maybe the internet is the way to do that.
Isn't that wild how social media can connect people from across the country?
So crazy. And it's funny because, when you follow someone, you kind of feel you know them a little bit. So it's
right. She didn't know
me at all, but I felt I had some sort of connection to her because I'd been following along for so many years. And she lived up to all of the expectations. She was a lovely person. She gave me her time and her insight and her encouragement, and then came out with a podcast and invited me to be on it. And so right before we started our podcast, I did an episode of her podcast that was just released, and she so graciously came onto our podcast, and we got to talk to her about all things Lucie and grief and what that's looked like as a public personality. And I even got to meet up with her last week. She happened to be in LA, and got to meet her in person, give her a big hug. And it was just so lovely to meet someone that I never would have met otherwise.
It's so crazy.
It's so weird. So weird. But yeah, I think it's been a really cool full circle sort of experience.
Yeah. It's interesting how brain cancer has pushed you to meet people in these that you would have never previously have done.
I know. And it's so funny because I was listening to the podcast episode, came out, I think it was yesterday, and I was listening to it, and she was saying Jordy says she's more introverted and blah, blah, blah. And it's I feel people don't really believe me when I say that I'm introverted and that I don't
Yeah, I believe you.
Well, you know that. I am the kind of person, my son is very social, and he wants to say hi to everyone at the market. And I'm like, I would like to get in and out of the market without speaking to anyone.
Right.
As fast as I possibly can. I don't like small talk. I don't want to do the schmoozing kind of thing with people that I don't know. It's just not interesting to me. And now like here I am like hosting a podcast. And
I know.
Like, and again, I think it's because we're having really intimate, deep conversations that it doesn't feel like that. And
you're not talking to like 100 people.
No, and but still so outside my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, hundreds of people will see it, but in the moment.
Yeah, like I'm just, it's very strange. So yeah, yesterday was a weird day because I was having a lot of feelings about, I think like just putting myself out there on another platform, you know?
Right. I think so 2 episodes were released this week. One was ours and then one was Lucie's. And both of them were like really intimate. I feel like the one that we released, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like our private conversation.
Oh no, I know.
Publicized. And that was like really weird because I'm like, this is like what we normally just talk about.
I know.
And we have that like all the time, but it was just so weird.
But then, and like, obviously Lucie's whole idea behind her podcast is to have these like more meaningful, deep conversations rather than these like rehearsed interview type responses from people so that you can really get to know somebody. And it was cool to do that. But I realized like listening back to it, I was like, I was very candid with someone that I don't know very well.
Mm-hmm.
And not only was I candid with someone I don't know very well, I was candid with her 100,000 plus audience, 200,000 plus audience, you know, that's going to like listen to this podcast. So I think I felt overwhelmed after I listened to it. I was like happy with the way it turned out and proud of it, but I also was like, whoa.
Yeah. Grief hangover.
Yeah. Grief hangover. Erica texted me this morning. She's like, I think you had a grief hangover. Like, you know what? I think I did.
Yeah.
We're going to coin that as a new term.
Yeah. I mean, like because then I thought about the time that I shared my story publicly for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I turned my phone off, got a glass of wine, but then the next day I was just like so depleted and felt so off. And I feel like that's just the thing that we get.
It is. And then it's like we've recorded 2 episodes this morning. So it's not like there was really a break.
Right.
But I mean, they were completely unrelated and great episodes to record, but it's just, it just doesn't stop. So
yeah, it doesn't stop. But I'm really excited about this episode too, just because when I think I only follow 2 influencers. And
should we name drop?
I don't know.
Okay, we're not going to actually name drop it, but I think it's hilarious because Erica's like not a social media person, really.
No.
Like doesn't keep up with like pop culture.
No, not at all.
She doesn't know. She has prosopagnosia. I don't think we've discussed this.
No, but oh my gosh, I can tell you about it. Something that happened yesterday. Okay, so I have prosopagnosia, which actually my chiropractor just wrote a blog on this saying that he has prosopagnosia. And it's funny because the picture that he posted of himself, I was like, that doesn't quite look like him. But he said that I have something in common with Brad Pitt. And so it's like a compilation of him and Brad Pitt because they both have prosopagnosia, but like I didn't know.
It was Brad Pitt.
Or him. I was just like,
You're like, interesting face.
So facial blindness. I can't register faces. And my whole life made sense in grad school when I took like the prosopagnosia test and failed. I got a 0%.
Like it would show people like Oprah without hair or like the president without hair, John Travolta without hair, like pretty like known figures.
I had 0%.
Zero idea who they were.
It was scary.
And I honestly don't think if they had hair, you would have done.
You said
100%. Yeah, I got 100%. Like I'm good at that. I mean, we ran into at the height of like Game of Thrones popularity. We were at Starbucks and ran into Lena Headey, who played Cersei, one of the main characters in Game of Thrones. And I'm like starstruck and looking at her, and Erica's looking at her too. So I'm thinking like, of course Erica knows.
I was talking to her.
She was talking to her and I'm like, wow, I felt starstruck. And then we like go to leave the place and
no, here's what you were in the car and I went into Starbucks.
Yeah.
And Cersei and her daughter were in front of me and I was talking to her and then she left Starbucks. And you were like, oh my gosh.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's Cersei.
Yeah. When I got back in the car, I can't remember.
I think I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just talked to her. And you're like, yeah, I know. Isn't her daughter so cute? I'm like, sure, but it's Cersei from Game of Thrones. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is.
And the barista knew and
For
said
sure.
something to me, and I was so confused of like, like, okay. I also was obsessed with Chad Michael Murray, and on that same block where I saw Cersei, I walked past Chad Michael Murray and had no zero idea. I always said I would never know when Obama was president, and I always said I would never know if I walked past Obama unless there were like 20 security guards around him, and that would be like my indication.
That would be the tell.
Yes. So anyway, last night I was at a networking event, and I've been going to a lot of networking events, and it's really like the same group of people.
Yeah.
Which it's funny because I'm not introverted. I'm extroverted.
You are.
But it's so weird with my prosopagnosia because
you probably have met these people a lot of times and you can't remember.
So I met someone like 3 or 4 times. I'm at the networking event, and put that over there. And I am like, you look so familiar. Like, I just kept looking at her throughout the night.
It's funny to me that you would use that phrase, you look so familiar. Like, you know where you know her from, probably.
I could not
like,
remember.
Probably the same building at the same networking event like a few months ago.
Okay, so I keep looking at her and thinking, I know her. It didn't even occur to me that I would have known her from another networking event. And I'm leaving the event because I was thinking I've spoken to everyone I want to talk to. And she comes up to me and she's like, hi, it's so good to see you. And I was like, oh, it's so good to see you too. I'm extra friendly. And she goes, were you able to put your kids down? And I was like, what are we talking about? And then she gave more information, and I'm like, I saw her 2 weeks ago at a different networking event. It was just her and I talking for 45 minutes.
That's insane.
I know.
I feel like you developed this later in life because I don't remember this being an issue as kids. I feel like you knew everyone.
I had other context cues because I knew what to expect. It's when I see someone
out of context.
Yes.
But you saw her at a networking event.
It was a different networking event.
Okay.
I remember when I was in grad school and during winter break, I went to Tahoe to ski, and someone who I was going to school with for 6 or 7 months came up to me and he started talking about classes, and I was thinking, did you go to Boulder? And it took me like 5 full minutes to realize that he was in my current grad school program.
That's crazy.
So,
do you know what's funny about this?
What?
It's just like, you're the perfect person to be a therapist. Because if you see your client out in the world that is so out of context, you would literally never.
I know, but I have to tell people sometimes that if they say hi to me in a different context, I may not know.
Right. Because it's like, obviously we tell them, hey, I'm not going to initiate conversation with you.
But if they initiate with me.
But if they initiate with you and you don't recognize them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are they supposed to do with that?
I don't know. Anyway, I completely forgot
how we got on this topic. I'm not sure.
Okay. We were talking about
Lucie. Oh, 2 influencers. That
2 influencers.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember how we got here. But anyway, one of them shall not be named. But then I started following Lucie because you were following Lucie. Yeah. And then she was pregnant and I was pregnant like a few months behind her. So I started following her too. And then got bought into her whole life also. And she's like a really easy person
to listen to. And I mean, she's just creative and fun and she's very real. And so we were so excited to have her on our podcast and just learn more about who she is and her life. And
you did the podcast with her first.
Yes.
So she did mention something around having death anxiety. And so it's like we reached out to her because you were on her. It's like you did a Tradesy podcast.
Pink would call this
episode.
A home and home, which is a term that I did not know before. But hey, it's like you do my podcast, I'll do your podcast kind of thing. But yeah, I brought it up to her because in my episode, obviously we talk a lot about death, and then she mentioned having death anxiety, and I was like, oh, this could be so interesting to explore.
Yeah, because that's such a normal concept. And for her of like, she's not going through like a medical diagnosis currently, and so it's just interesting of, okay, what are things that people day to day experience grief like or death like with?
So not only did she talk about death anxiety when I was on the podcast, but she also talked about a medical situation that happened like, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I could relate in a lot of ways to like the patient advocacy piece because when you're faced with like an urgent medical situation, a lot of times you as the patient don't feel like you know what to say or like what to ask for. And so you end up just like doing maybe a more aggressive version of treatment or intervention than you would want to do. And that was one of the things that Lucie touches on in this episode as well. And I think maybe other people can relate, where you walk into a medical office and you sort of feel maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit less powerful, less knowing, and maybe more fearful to like advocate for yourself and knowing your body and all those kinds of things. And I think some of that comes with time and experience and age. And some of that is just about the like hierarchy dynamic of when you're in a doctor's office, you feel like they have the authority. And so that was something that we also get into in this episode.
Yeah. So I hope everyone enjoys the episode with death anxiety and patient advocacy. Woo! I actually just found, which I'm picking up today from my parents' house, we all in kindergarten created recipes. So we have like a recipe book and we're friends with everyone from kindergarten.
We are. A lot of our friends are like the same people we knew.
So I want to see like what did everyone make when they were 5 years old.
Did you go to one of those schools that had very few people?
No. We went to like full-blown LA public school.
We went to the worst of the worst.
Yeah, we went to like really big schools actually, which is so funny that we
great
all
that you guys are
close.
all so close. Yeah,
I know. It's really funny.
That's amazing.
So Lucie, thank you for joining us. Yeah. Hi, I'm so happy
Thank you
you're
guys
here.
for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. I was just thinking as we were getting ready for this, like one of the reasons why I wanted you to be on our podcast is because you've made it like your mission recently to start like exploring these really taboo topics and trying to talk about the real stuff, which is the name of Lucie's podcast.
Yes.
And so it made me wonder, like, what was the motivation behind starting the podcast? And also, let me back up. Introduce yourself, please, so our audience knows who you are.
All right. I'm Lucie. I am 31 years old. I am an East Coaster, so we're all the way across the country from each other. But I'm a content creator full time. A lot of people started following me back in between 2015 and 2019 when I worked at Refinery 29 and I hosted a lot of their YouTube content, which sort of led me to start building my own brand off of their platform and just posting on my own accounts and becoming, I guess the word is an influencer. Yeah. It's a word that I don't love, but it is what I do for my full-time job. And ever since 2019, I've been off on my own, working with a talent agency, creating content across Instagram, YouTube, now TikTok, and just, trying to create applicable, relevant content to whatever is going on in my life at the time, which recently has been a lot of moving content, homeowner content, motherhood content, and in more recent months, pregnancy content with my second. So that's who I am. And podcast world was kind of this was just a new entry for me. As a creator who's been on all these other platforms, I've had requests from my followers to start a podcast for years. And I personally love listening to podcasts. So I'm a little shocked that I waited so long before I took the plunge. Yeah. But as a creator, I think that's why I waited so long, because I knew how much work it was going to be. I know a lot of people start a podcast and it's their first venture. And as a person who already had a fully functioning business on all these other platforms, I was like, I can't dedicate time to this if I'm still focusing on all these other areas. And I also knew if I was going to do a podcast, I really wanted it to be part of a network where I would have production resources and help. And it wasn't going to be my number one, platform. So I thought about a format and what I wanted to talk about. And as a creator who's been asked to be a guest on a handful of other shows, I realized that I was being interviewed on all these other shows and being asked the same questions repeatedly, like almost all the same questions of how I got my start in the industry, what my advice is for anyone who wants to be a creator,
Yeah.
I don't know, anything I was talking about, I got the same questions, and I was finding that I had these repeatable answers that I was sharing on every podcast to the point where I didn't even want to listen to myself on other shows because it was so repetitive. And I would also listen to a ton of podcasts where they would bring on guests that had been on other shows, sometimes in the same week. And they're all just repeating these stock answers, like media trained answers.
Yeah.
So I thought, how can I start a show that is going to bring on these people that people want to hear from, but are going to, I want to ask them questions that they've never been asked, specifically on a podcast, but maybe even ever in their lives. So questions that are just uncomfortable, pushing the boundaries. And I don't need them to give me answers to every question. Like, I respect that people all have boundaries, but
sure,
if they don't want to answer, I want to know why. And I want to unpack the boundary and sort of understand where that lies for them. And then also, one main pillar of the show that I'm excited about is that every so often the episodes are just with an audience caller. And that's what you were on my show for. And so it's not, an influencer or a celebrity, but it's just someone from my audience who has an amazing story to tell or an interesting perspective on something. And it's just giving me such a great chance to connect with my followers in a way I never could have before.
So cool. I just listened to your friend's episode yesterday about giving birth in the car.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
what a crazy one.
Yeah, on the edge.
So wild.
On the edge of my seat. Yeah, it was wild.
I know. And that's like, I loved that episode because it's such a scary topic, but it's a positive birth story.
Yeah,
and
it was.
People are loving it.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I have a question for you. Like, because you're asking these questions on the podcast, do you feel like Lucie in life outside of podcast world pushes the boundaries and asks these questions of your friends and family? Like, do you feel like that's kind of the way that you interact?
Yes, definitely. I think I'm the person who is a little bit of a open book to the point of potential discomfort, but in a way that I think, at least when I'm the one doing it in conversations, I always feel like it's helping open up the other person, and it's kind of telling them, like, we're safe here. I'm going to tell you very personal things and you can say anything and there's no judgment coming from my end. Like, even just last night or 2 nights ago, my husband and I played tennis with this other couple in town, and then we all went out for ice cream. And as we're sitting around this bench having ice cream, we started talking about my celiac diagnosis and like how I found out that I had that. And I was just being open about how, for years of my life, I just had diarrhea every day.
Yep.
And my husband is like nudging me, Shh, they don't want to hear that over ice cream. And I'm like, listen, I know some of the stuff I say is TMI, but that's just who I am as a person. And I feel so comfortable. Like, I don't care if anyone knows any personal fact about me. The only reason I put boundaries up for certain things in my life is to protect the other people in my life who don't want those things out there.
You could be a therapist. You're like, I create safe spaces. Questions.
Well, actually, also, I listen to so many podcasts that are therapy podcasts, and I'm obsessed with them as a viewer. I just think it's such a voyeuristic experience, and I learn so much from every episode. And I almost, I pulled so much inspiration from those episodes, but it's a fine line because I'm not a mental health expert. So I don't want to ever show up as like, I'm trying to give my guest therapy or I'm trying to, teach them anything. It's more of just one of those really deep conversations. But I definitely feel like there's another life where I would love to be a mental health expert.
I think you would be great at it.
And I had so many questions for Jordy. Remember when I was asking you on my show about like if being a therapist changes how good you feel in your life? Like, I just feel like it would help put things into perspective so well.
It's interesting because I think it can go both ways. It's like, I think it can make you realize like people are going through a lot of really hard things and like put your life in perspective, but also, there's like vicarious trauma. And so you're like working with people who are going through really intense things and Erica works with a lot of suicidal patients, and I worked in addiction for a long time. And it can be heavy. And so like sometimes it can go the other way where it feels like you almost need to like compartmentalize a little bit. And it feels overwhelming.
But Jordy and I have really great car conversations.
We do.
That no one else really maybe would want to be around us sometimes. We get dark.
Yeah, we get dark. We go there. I
love a good car conversation. Yeah, and we talked about how, at least on the show Couples Therapy, I noticed that the therapists needed therapists to unpack what was happening in their work life. So it makes sense, but to me, it's just those deep conversations and those late nights where I stay up with a friend or a new friend and go really deep. It's nothing feeds my soul like those deep conversations. So the fact that I can now have them live is just an amazing work perk.
And that other people can benefit from them. Like maybe they don't have a place in their life where they can be that candid. And to like have a space to be able to be a fly on the wall in someone else's world is probably like a really meaningful, valuable experience for them.
Definitely.
So I was on your show last week. We did a lot of talking about death, which makes sense because of my circumstances. So you had shared with me that was something that you used to be really scared of. Like that concept was something that like really sort of overwhelmed you. And you gave me like a really cute example. I don't remember what the song was, but you said like you used to cover your ears. Yeah.
Yes, it was the song, "It's my life, it's now or never. I gonna live forever." And I was like, absolutely not. I am gonna live forever. We're gonna la 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 during this part of the song.
So like just like fully avoiding the idea that like that's ever going to happen to you.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm wondering like where do you feel like that intense fear sort of came from?
I mean, I don't know if it's that I was never really talked to much about death, which is surprising given that 3 of my 4 grandparents were passed away before I was born. Mm. And so I only ever met one grandma, and, I always knew these other people had gone to another place. And actually, like almost all of those other grandparents, my parents had lost when they were relatively young. And I don't know if it was that trauma had kind of led me to having a fear of that happening with me and me losing my parents young. And I remember always having a little bit of anxiety around that. Like I was the person who, if the phone rang and my parents picked up and like their voice didn't sound jovial, I was like, who died? What happened?
What's wrong?
It's just immediate darkness. I don't exactly know really where the fear of death came from, aside from the fact that I just loved living. Like I really enjoyed life, and the thought, maybe it's that I'm a little bit of like a claustrophobic person, and the thought of it just not being, like me not being anything, is hard for me to wrap my mind around at all.
I mean, yeah. I think it's hard for all of us to wrap our minds around.
I think, right, it's like that's like a known thing, but most people don't ever talk about death. And I feel like thinking about you now as a mom and pregnant, I've talked to a lot of people who say that their fear of death kind of comes out again as their parent. And I'm curious if that has come up for you now, being a mom to a toddler and being pregnant.
I mean, one other thing that I'm remembering is like always having a strange fear of graveyards and like cemeteries, and just feeling like the whole concept was strange. It actually led me, and I think with my claustrophobia, it's actually led me to declare to my family that I don't ever want to be buried in a cemetery, but that I just want to be cremated and like sprinkled somewhere in nature and blown in the wind. Like that to me feels a lot better. And it's almost like a return to Earth in a way that I guess people feel that's happening in a cemetery too. But like for me, you're in a box, and I don't know. I've heard
like that claustrophobia.
Right, the claustrophobia thing. The claustrophobia,
like it's not working for me. And I've heard, I think like, you know, when you hear one thing and it just sticks with you forever.
Yes.
I remember hearing, which, you know, who knows if it's real, but I remember hearing about coffins that were opened up from graveyards years later that had scratch marks on the inside, and the fact that the person maybe woke up and wasn't actually dead, like that just really stuck with me.
Yeah. I mean, that's
terrifying.
I was like,
I will never
that's
go
worst case scenario.
Worst case. And like, even just if I haven't really intentionally put myself in dark, tight spaces, but if I ever, like, I have real trouble going through an MRI machine, lying in a tight, dark spot. So I just don't want to do that. And I think as a mom, it's less, I don't think that actually having kids or being in this place in my life in the parenting sense has changed my perception of things so much as just having grown and having had more and more people in my life that are meaningful to me pass away as I've been older and just like a little bit more able to understand the concept, that the whole concept of it feels a little bit less threatening to me and just a little bit less scary. And as I was trying to describe to Jordy, I've been able to extrapolate and kind of think of it in almost like a wider lens of all of humanity, where I now think of everyone that I've ever known that has passed away as almost having like joined this large group of humans that have come before us on Earth, like the majority of which are now in that other place. And we are the minority over here living. Right. And so it's almost like they've gone to this place that everyone else has gone to. And at some point in my life, whether it's soon or not soon, I'm going to have that journey of meeting them there. And now it almost feels like I'm having the chance to meet up with people that I care about deeply and that I know. And that I almost feel like they will make that experience less scary for me.
Yeah. So there's like a comfort in other people that you're close to having gone through that.
Yes. It's like they've guided the way and paved the path. And it's, you know, it's going to happen for all of us at some point. And now it's almost like we're joining hands with people instead of being separated from everyone we love.
Yeah. I mean, the perspective shift feels nice. Yeah. I remember like in college, I took a death and dying class. And as part of that, I had to plan my own funeral.
I remember. Oh my gosh.
And I wrote a document.
What an interesting class.
Oh yeah. It was actually the most interesting. I had to write out a full page around like my funeral plan. And I remember calling you of like, this is what I want to happen.
I'm like, I don't want to think about that.
Oh my God.
No thanks.
Yeah, that's a deep exercise.
So deep.
Especially for like a little college student.
I know. I was 20 years old, I think. And then you think, okay, well, this just won't happen to me. And then getting your diagnosis, I mean, you've had to think about, you know, creating like your Bible of what would happen.
Yeah,
and
my will and all those things.
The Glassner Bible.
The Glassner Bible, exactly.
You talked about the Glassner
I did.
Bible.
I talked about the Glassner Bible and all the things, the hard conversations that you have to have that like you never would imagine having to have. But it's like, then you step back and you're like, oh wait, everyone should be having these conversations. Because nobody's immune to it, whether you're sick or not. Like, we're all going to be in that position at some point. And like,
I find it so interesting. One of the main takeaways I got from you being on my show was how a majority of your thoughts surrounding your diagnosis and any fears that you have about it are actually about other people in your life. And it's almost like you are the last resort. Like you think about yourself last, and I don't know if that means you're the least scared for yourself, or if you haven't like let yourself get to the deep processing place about what it's going to be like for you. But
I think I just try not to spend time thinking about something that is going to inevitably happen. You know, like I don't spend a lot of time in like, what is that going to feel like, or what is that going to be like? Because I think about it like labor. Like, I thought about labor so much, and I was so stressed about giving birth. And it's like, you know, that the only way to get your baby out is to give birth. right? Like, or either have a C-section.
You have to go through it.
You have to go through it. So it's like, after I went through it, I was like, why did I spend so much time worrying about what that was going to be like when like there was no other option? I was going to have to do it. So for me, it's like I'd rather spend my time thinking about things that where I actually have some control and I actually have like writing a will or a medical directive where like you actually have control over the things that are important to you. But the actual dying piece to me, it's going to happen. So I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about it because thinking about it isn't going to make it not happen.
Right.
Easier said than done.
I know, easier said than done. And the other thing that I didn't really mention when I was talking to you last week is that one of the reasons why I think that I think so much about the other people in my life that are impacted by this is because I actually do not know what I would do if Erica had brain cancer. Like, my world would be shattered. And I feel panicked even thinking about that.
This is why I started therapy again.
Yeah, like literally she started therapy and I'm very proud of her.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, but like or like if I think about if it was Hank, like my husband, it would be so hard. And so I just put myself in their shoes and I'm like, yeah, like this is not just something that affects me. Yes, it affects me, but it like is such a ripple effect to everybody around you. And that part just makes me sad that like my set of circumstances impacts somebody else in that way.
You're saying like when you were a kid, it's like you don't, it's so much, I feel so, you don't really know the conceptualization of death. I feel like it changes over time. So it's like, as you're saying, as you got older, it actually became less scary. Maybe because there's more known. I mean, I don't know, like the process is more known, or like it's just so interesting how over time it's become less scary. To me, I feel like it's become more scary, but
it's become more scary like for you, the idea of you dying or the idea of me dying?
You.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. It's different. It's like I feel like when you're in it, I'm like in acceptance that like this is going to happen at some point and I'm here for some amount of time and I don't know what that amount of time is. Maybe I have a little indicator better than anybody else that it might be a little bit shorter, but I just think about like everyone who's going to be left behind and like I know what that feels like and looks like and it's really terrible. Yeah. And so that's the part that sort of like I think keeps me thinking outside of myself. And trying to plan, you know, like you said, you know, my whole family knows that I don't want to be buried. I want to be cremated and sprinkled back into the earth. And I feel the same way too. Like just having those conversations about like what you want and what you don't want, I think is so important so that people aren't left to like try and figure out what it is that you wanted, because that's a lot of pressure.
You know, I think we talked about this on my show, but I actually think we talked about it after we stopped recording. So I don't even know if it made it in the recording, but we had this really interesting follow-up discussion where it basically came to light the fact that everyone is kind of living life on an unknown timeline. Nobody knows what's going to happen, whether it's directly to us or something that's going to like a nuclear weapon that's going to hit the earth or like a planet that's going to collide, whatever. Like we literally don't know what's going to happen. And what I found really fascinating, I think you said it, but maybe it was just me thinking about it and we didn't really talk about it. But the fact that we're doing this podcast where we were broadcasting like your situation where you happen to have been told because of this brain cancer, I have a 5% chance of living past 5 years. Mm-hmm. And it's like this timeline that most people don't get. But what I found fascinating was that odds are there's going to be someone who listened to that podcast and felt bad for you and was like going through their normal life who somehow is going to die before you for some random reason. Yeah. And that is
that's what happened. Our friend's cousin died on a motorcycle a few weeks ago and he was 23.
Yeah. And we were just like,
he was not given a
life. We're like, you have no idea what could happen to you.
Exactly.
Anything could happen at any moment. And so, yeah, it's like, you know, living your days intentionally, I guess, is like for me, feels like the best thing I can do with my time. Thinking about the what ifs of the things that are inevitable for me, and it's just funny because I was never like that. I was like such a worrier and like would go down a spiral and all of that. But I just feel like there was like a sense of peace with this whole thing. And one of the things I was thinking about when preparing to chat with you is like, I know for me, so Lucie and I connected like, I don't know, maybe back in August or something when I was first diagnosed, because I saw an Instagram story. I'm a follower. I'm a fan. And
yes.
And I saw an Instagram story where she talked about one-on-one coaching. And I was like, that seems like super outside of my comfort zone, but like, maybe I'm just going to go for it. And everyone in my life was supportive, and our friend Deb knows Lucie. And so we made the introduction and we chatted, and she encouraged me to like, post my story online. Let's make meaning of this experience for myself. And I was doing that for a while. And then I like fell into like a not great headspace where I was like feeling like a loss of identity, and like I was losing my hair, and I just had all of these secondary losses based on my specific set of circumstances that made it really hard to like show up online. And I'm just so curious, as a public persona where your business is to like show up, what is that like for you when you're navigating difficult things or losses in your own life, and like life just has to keep going and this is how you make your living?
Yeah, I think it's just come pretty naturally to me to not talk about something or share too much about it until I feel like it's processed or like I'm ready to say something about it. It doesn't have to be, things can take years to process, but I usually don't show up and just start talking about every little tiny thing that's happening in my life unless I feel like comfortable talking about it at that point, or all the people who are involved with it have given me permission to talk about it. Actually, I don't remember exactly how long ago it was. Maybe between 5 to 7 years ago, both of my parents had cancer diagnoses at the same time.
Wow.
Like different types of cancer, both relatively treatable, and both of them have been treated. But I remember my dad at the time was very much like, you can share whatever you want. He's also a public personality in a bit of his own way. So, I didn't make too much content around it, but if it came up, I didn't feel like I was sharing his private info.
Right.
But I remember my mom, actually, she had a type of breast cancer. She didn't even tell some of her closest friends that she was going through that.
Yeah.
And so she was definitely like, don't post about it, don't talk about it. But it was something that was definitely top of mind for me naturally during that time. And I don't know, different aspects of my life, I feel like I'd need to sort of navigate them in different ways for different reasons. Most stuff that happens that's about me, a lot of my own health stuff, which I know we might get into, I'm just so comfortable talking about it, even when I don't have an answer to it yet. Even when it's like, I'm going to the doctor because here's a symptom I'm having. I think one reason why I don't do it all the time is because being on the internet, you can just get so many people coming at you with a diagnosis, which then makes you even more anxious if you're already like hypochondriac tendencies, as I have. So I try not to, but I mean, when I feel like it's a pretty simple thing that I'm comfortable sharing, I feel like I'm an open book and I will just share it if it feels right in the moment.
Well, even physically, like I listened to some of your like pregnancy diaries, and I'm like, how is Lucie showing up right now?
Yeah.
You're like so unwell. And,
I know.
And yet here you are.
I mean, I was actually watching that episode back recently because, like, for people who don't know, I basically popped on for 5 to 10 minutes every week from like weeks 4 to 14 in my pregnancy. And as I was watching it back, I was like, I remember being in that time period, and I remember being so unwell and even questioning myself, like, how did I show up on this video?
Truly.
And in hindsight, I think
it's very impressive to just like push through.
It's something that's actually a good lesson for people who are content consumers to realize, is that those clips were like 5 minutes out of a horrific day.
Yeah.
And it would be like the 5 minutes when I felt like I was okay to button up and put on a sweater and fix my mascara and sit in front of the camera. Whereas the whole rest of the day was spent just being really not happy and not feeling well at all. Even the moments I was sitting here, I wasn't feeling well, but it was like I had this little burst of adrenaline to like film this one thing that I knew was going to make for good content.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that was definitely hard, but
that makes sense. You're like,
it's such a small pocket that people see it and they're like, oh, she must be fine. But
oh no, I was really like, you're not fine. How are you doing this? Yeah. Like when I'm physically unwell, like it's hard to
be honest, I actually don't agree with you.
Oh, really?
When you're physically unwell, you push through.
Oh, that's true. I guess I was pregnant, had a migraine and needed to throw up.
And you still did sessions.
But
with
then
clients.
I was like, you know what? I was actually thinking today we could have a 30-minute session instead of a 45-minute session. And then like I ended and then
I'm like, no, you push through too.
Actually, like in my first trimester, I was almost every day was just horrible, like sitting at home. I was in front of the toilet multiple times. And then there was this one day when I had a shoot in Brooklyn that I was on set for the entire day. Like I had to drive into Brooklyn. I didn't want to take the train because I wanted to be like in control if I needed to pull over.
Right.
So I drove in for the morning, went to the shoot. There were literally 50 crew members. It was a huge thing. I brought my own mac and cheese to have them make me because I was like, this is the only thing I can eat for lunch.
Yes. Right.
And it was, call it adrenaline or like, I don't know what, but I was just not nauseous that day. Like I was fine. And then the day ended and it was like 6 p.m. and I drove back home. It took 2 hours. There was so much traffic and I got home so late and crashed and went to bed. And like the next day I'm in front of the toilet all day. And I was like, if this was yesterday, I would have not been able to do the shoot. But I think I would have been because it's just when you're thrust into the moment of you got to do it. People are relying on you. It's like, especially it's like being pregnant with a kid. Like you just have to get them out of bed. You can't just be like, I'm too tired to go. You have to go.
Yeah. Right. You just have to do it.
Women are so resilient.
I know.
Look at us.
So I guess on the topic of feeling unwell, can you tell us a little bit more about because when we were talking about like grief and things that have come up, you shared a little bit more about a medical issue. So can you tell us a little bit more about what happened and what led to like this medical intervention that you needed?
A couple times in college, I would have this like strange pain under my rib cage on the right side and never knew what it was, but I went to Johns Hopkins and I was surrounded by all these future medical students and a friend of mine was like, it sounds like you're having a gallbladder attack. And I was like, why would I be having a gallbladder attack? I mean, you look up the symptoms or you look up the risk factors and it's like the opposite of me as a person. And I'm like, I don't think that's it, but whatever. I never really got it checked. I just kind of moved forward. And it happened so infrequently that it wasn't worth dealing with. It would just be like one random night I would be in pain and then the next day I'd be gone. And fast forward to 2017, I was away on a vacation with my siblings and we went out to dinner. And that night I was on the floor of the hotel room the whole night in writhing agony and just so stressed about what it could be because, as we mentioned, my hypochondriac tendencies, I've been blessed with not having too many medical issues in my life growing up. So to me, to have acute pain in one spot is like,
so scary.
You're going to die.
Very scary.
And I was terrified. And I was also not in the country. Yeah, I'm
you're out
totally
of the country.
Out of the country. Fast forward, I get home and I immediately go to a doctor and they do a little ultrasound and they tell me that I have gallstones, which is, I don't even know, dietarily, I definitely didn't grow up with the best diet. I was a 90s kid who was eating like all the standard processed packaged stuff.
All the things.
Yeah, I had all that stuff. But like, I don't think that I have a pretty healthy diet today. I mean, maybe in 2017 I didn't because I wasn't diagnosed celiac yet. So I was kind of just eating whatever. But I found it really hard to believe that my diet would have been the issue. And also just being a person who has it such a natural, this is a societal, like another societal issue, but being a person with a very naturally slim build and body, the fact that I would have like a dietary issue or like what I was eating was bad just never crossed my mind. I was like, my body looks like this, so it's healthy, which is not true, but that's definitely what I thought.
Yeah.
And, you know, they told me I had these gallstones, and I wound up kind of trying to figure it out myself because it just didn't make sense to me. And I went back to, you know, I had been on the hormonal birth control pill since I was 16, and I went back to all the different pills I had been on, and there have been multiple pills that I've been on that I've quickly switched off of because they've had lawsuits and all these problems. And one or two of them, both very clearly the side effect on the packaging was like, may cause gallbladder disease and may lead to gallstones or whatever. And I was just pretty confident that that was what this was. Obviously, no doctor is going to be like, yep, that's the cause. Right. It was your pill. But
I'm just curious really quick, like around being on birth control, like when you got prescribed birth control, were you walked through like the potential side effects by your prescriber or like?
In only the most positive of ways. So I remember, you know, I didn't go on the pill because I had painful periods or I had anything irregular. I literally went on the pill so I could have sex with my now husband and who was my high school boyfriend, and was like, I don't want to get pregnant at all costs, so I'm going to go on this pill. It was also, as you guys know, like something every single person was basically getting on. And I remember asking, what are the side effects? And my OBGYN at the time was like, well, it might cause less painful periods, or it might clear up any acne, or your boobs might get bigger. And I was like, this all sounds fucking amazing.
Awesome. Sign me up.
Yeah, I was like, come on, why wouldn't I want this? And, you know, no one, of course, I kind of knew that it meant I wasn't having ovulation. So I like wasn't having a cycle, but it wasn't really explained to me the potential drawbacks of just shutting off the way your body operates. Mm-hmm. I also was never taught, you know, obviously there's the scary side effects, like could cause gallbladder disease or could lead to some autoimmune conditions, but also like it can mask major conditions, which we'll get to in 2021 with my celiac diagnosis, but it can like fix problems that you want to know if you have. And so a lot of people come off the pill after a decade or so of being on it and all of a sudden have these mystery problems.
Oh, wow.
It's easy at that point to like blame the pill, but really it's like the pill was actually correcting it. And now that you're not on this synthetic thing, you now realize that you have PCOS or, you know, an autoimmune disease like celiac. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
I remember at the time I was told I have gallstones, and I went to my friend's dad, who was a gastro, and he basically like did an endoscopy to confirm that I didn't have any other like stomach ulcer or any other issue. And once he confirmed that the pain I was having was my gallbladder, he immediately, and multiple other doctors, just the immediate recommendation was you just want to get it taken out. Because if you, God forbid, like I travel a lot for work, if you're in another country again and you have a really bad gallbladder attack or it gets infected from the stones, like really clogging it up, it could become emergency surgery, and you'd rather just have elective like surgery when it's
sort of like catch it before it gets too bad.
Yeah. And I'd never had surgery for anything aside from getting my wisdom teeth out, but I immediately, like, it was almost without thinking. I was like, that's the doctor's recommendation. When is the soonest I can schedule this? And I literally scheduled the procedure for the next day. They were like, we have an opening tomorrow. And I was like, great, I'm coming in at 7 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
I will get this out. And really didn't think about it. Wasn't too nervous about it. I was actually kind of excited. Like, I felt like I was going through a fun, I've always known that a gallbladder is not an essential organ. Like that's one of the one memories I have from bio.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's not a big deal. It's going to be fine. I even made a YouTube video of this journey, and like you can see the excitement on my face, like going into surgery. I'm like,
you get a really good nap from like going under.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
a really good nap.
It's a totally new experience too. You're just
I
like,
was so excited. And I was also, being a like previous pre-med Johns Hopkins student, I was so intrigued by the laparoscopic procedure. And I actually like told the doctor, I want to put a portion of this on my YouTube video. So I know you're going to have like a video recording as you do it. Can you save the hard drive for me? I want to watch it. Like I'm intrigued.
you were
And
invested.
I woke up. I was invested. I woke up from surgery with a flash drive around my neck and was like, my video's ready, and was so excited. But the moment I woke up that was when it was kind of a rude awakening, where I was like, oh my fucking God, I feel like absolute shit.
Yeah.
And this healing process was way longer and way harder and way worse than I could have ever imagined. I mean, just the physical recovery from the abdominal surgery, which was laparoscopic. So I wasn't even like cut open in a line. Like I shudder to think of a C-section because it was just like 3 holes, but was a horrific recovery. It killed me to laugh.
Oh.
I couldn't walk for a couple weeks. I remember like they had to pump me with carbon dioxide or some sort of gas for the procedure. And then the gas was like shooting through my spinal cord.
Whoa. Oh no.
And like, I remember like anytime I'd sit up or lie down, it was like gas bubbles moving in my body, which felt like an animal running inside of me. It was really bad. And I mean, the one positive outcome was that like the gallbladder pain was gone from the moment I woke up. That was healed. And I can't even say I've had a single negative digestive side effect from not having my gallbladder. I feel like I can eat everything now. I don't ever think, I better not eat that fatty fried whatever. I already can't eat a lot of that because of a celiac, but you better believe I'm getting like the gluten-free fried calamari if it's on a menu.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything to me digestively. So from a medical standpoint, it solved the problem. But it probably was like maybe about a year post the surgery when I really started to think about what I had done. And also that was around the time at Refinery 29 that I was just getting a little bit more into holistic, naturopathic wellness content, learning about it, listening to podcasts about it, hearing people talk about it. And I came across a number of podcasts where people were talking about healing gallstones naturally and how to dissolve them and all these like lifestyle changes and dietary changes that could contribute to just like fixing the problem. And not only was it nothing that I had ever seen or like thought of before, but I wasn't at the place in my life in 2017 to even have thought of giving that a go. It was like, I'm in pain. The doctors recommend surgery. We're cutting this thing out. And it was a very rash decision.
Well, it's kind of in the same way with the birth control, right? They're like, you want to have unprotected sex and not get pregnant, take the pill. And I feel like it was almost sold to you in a similar way.
Oh, yeah. It was just like, there's no other alternative. Like, this is the recommendation. And listen, maybe I would have gone down a few lifestyle changes and it wouldn't have gotten better. And then I would have needed the surgery anyway. But at least in that case, I would have felt like I gave myself a shot at trying everything I could. Because the place I ended up in a year later was like, yes, everything's quote fixed medically. I'm not in pain. But I can't help but feel this immense sadness over the fact that this little tiny organ inside of me that I was born with and that has been there forever and that had a purpose, even if it's not essential, it was helping.
Yeah.
And I just ejected it from my body and just like got rid of it and threw it to the wind. And now my body's compensating in other ways that I maybe don't know about, even if it's not having immediate side effects. Like, it's changed and it's rerouting pathways to make up for that.
Right.
And I don't know, it feels like sometimes when I talk about it, it feels like such a silly thing to be sad about, but it's like I genuinely feel like a part of me is missing and it was my fault. Like I could have done something to protect it and I just chose to cut it out and get rid of it forever.
Well, it sounds like there's like some guilt around the decision. And yet when you talk about it factually, I'm like, oh, I can, we put so much trust. Yeah, like trust in medical providers. And I think it's hard, especially at that time, to like be able to make a decision when it was like, here, you can do it tomorrow. Like, here's a quick fix. And I think as humans, we naturally want things to just be better now. And I'm so curious if you were told, hey, you can do the surgery or you can do these lifestyle choices, what you would have chosen. But it almost felt like not a full
You didn't really
choice.
have the choice.
Yeah, I mean, no one was giving me options of lifestyle changes, but I think at that time in my life, I would have just gone for the surgery because it felt there was no one, you know, I grew up in that type of Western medicine environment. Like anytime I was sick, I had a Z-Pak or an antibiotic. And it's only in my adult life and my own learnings and things I've come to on my own that I have come to trust and be interested in exploring other holistic modalities.
Yeah.
It's like I have such opposing, conflicting views on so much of medicine because like when I look at your situation, Jordy, like you're not going to be cured with a lifestyle change and all the treatments you've undergone. I mean,
maybe
exactly. I mean, as we talked about, you know, I was very interested in what changes and lifestyle dietary things because whatnot. But I understand why a Western medicine doctor would not be like, oh, it's because of that Swedish candy you're eating. You know, like they're not going to say that. And they have treatments and procedures, medical procedures that are invasive surgeries and procedures that saved you and helped you at least prolong the process. And that's like, I would never be like, don't do that, you know, just change your diet and start exercising, whatever people say. But
well, we actually just watched a video.
Erica just sent me a video about like this guy who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And like, I don't know if you know anything about pancreatic cancer, but it's like,
I know it's one like very aggressive,
very fast moving. People don't typically live very long. And he decided against doing chemotherapy and he just wanted to do a more holistic approach. I mean, he did all sorts of things.
Oh, he did exorcisms
and like shamans. And I mean, really went through all the avenues you can go through. But
he was cured?
It sounds like, and like he's still here, you know, and he's still living and he chose not to do the traditional medicine route. That doesn't mean it's going to be right or work for everyone. Yeah. But I think what I'm hearing in your story is like, and I know it sounds like you take on the responsibility of not doing your research or not like advocating for yourself enough as a patient. But I almost feel like the disservice was done by the doctors who didn't like provide you with more options. And they presented it to you as like this sense of urgency, you know, like, oh, you can have the surgery tomorrow. Like, we can get this out tomorrow. Right. And like you said, it's not like, yes, you were in pain and yes, it could get worse, but it wasn't like a critical, urgent situation. It wasn't a brain tumor is my point. So yes, of course, there's things that I had done that needed to be done because it was an extreme circumstance, but that wasn't your experience. Right. And so I just wanted to like, I don't know, relieve you of some of that guilt if that helps at all. Because I think it's like really the doctor's responsibility, not that the patient shouldn't be an advocate, but when you're young and you've grown up in Western medicine, like you don't know the questions to ask. You don't know what to think. And I know from my personal experience, just I never really had any health issues before my cancer diagnosis. But like I've met with a few doctors that have like both, you know, they have a Western medicine approach and they also take into consideration acupuncture and diet changes and CBD and all these other things. And it's like I would not have known that had they not shared it with me. And it's like now I'm, you know, 30 something and I can like do my own research. But I just feel like as a young person, when you walk into a doctor's office, it's like really easy to just believe what they say. And not that it's wrong, but it's nice to have a full picture.
I definitely feel like if today I got this gallstone diagnosis, or if someone really close to me got it, and it wasn't, especially if they were having the attacks as infrequently as I was having them, I would probably tell them to like give themselves a timeline. Maybe it's 3 months, 6 months, and basically do as much of your own change it, make as many changes as you can and read as many stories of people who have had success in other holistic methods as possible, and just try everything for that short amount of time, knowing that if you get to the end of it and it doesn't work, you always have this as an option. But it's not like I'm in pain, my procedure is the next day, because that's just not enough time for anyone for an elective procedure for you to think about it. Like I wouldn't go get any sort of plastic surgery or even Botox. Like I wouldn't do that with just one night of sleep.
Like one day.
12 hours to make a decision.
It's just not enough time. And yeah, I mean, as of now, that's like, I feel like that's just one area of my life that I definitely think about a lot because it's so irreversible and it's just something that's gone. Like I'm never going to have that. I now have like
Yeah.
I have this gallbladder shaped pillow that has like a face on it, and
I love that.
It's like a little, my missing friend is here
so
in a pillow.
sweet.
Someone sent it to me when I posted about how I was feeling grief over it.
I love
But yeah,
that.
it's as you said, everything's relative, but it does feel like a silly thing to grieve over because it's like such an unnecessary organ or a non-essential.
Yeah, but I feel like
it's not about the organ. I feel like
I feel like there's like more things attached to it of like the meaning behind the process of like what it meant for you almost to go to a doctor, to get a recommendation, to not be given options. I feel like even as like a female patient, like a lot of times women are like dismissed and like don't get all of the necessary information. Like I think you made the best decision that you could, but the grief piece I feel like is really multifaceted around being a patient and like not having the autonomy to make an informed decision.
I mean, I even feel that way about the pill in general, which that leads us to the next medical issue, which came about in 2020. I came off the pill so that I could start prepping my body for conception. And within 1 month of being off the pill, all of a sudden I had a raging migraine every single day. Wow. To the point where I thought I had a brain tumor. Like I was in neurosurgeon offices getting scans of my brain.
This is when you found like the...
Yes, this is when I found that I have a missing vein or something in my head that is not a problem at all, but scary to look at on a scan.
Totally.
And, went to the doctor for this goose chase of why am I having a migraine every day, and started, unfortunately, just being given migraine pills. Like my husband is a chronic migraine sufferer. Genetically, it's like his grandma has it, his mom has it, and he has it like sometimes 8 migraines a month. And now he takes a prophylactic pill every day, but he used to just be given these like horse pills. It's like the moment you feel a migraine, come on, take this, and it knocks the migraine out, but also
I have migraines.
She suffers from migraines as well.
I feel like I've used those
one of the worst
pills.
Yes, and so I was being given, we did all these scans. You don't have a big issue, so you just maybe have migraines, and here's the pill to take when you feel one coming on. What's kind of scary also is that I did feel a couple of these when I was on the pill, and I did have a couple of those aura migraines, which they tell you is very dangerous when you're on the pill. But surprisingly, was never ripped off it. Like I was just on it for 11 years.
Yeah.
And by the time I came off, I knew something was up. Like I was literally had a migraine every day for 60 days and went to all these doctors. And it was one of those times in my life where I was just bopping between multiple doctors. And I actually got the call from one doctor when I was in the neurologist's office for my migraine trying to figure it out. And that other doctor told me that my blood work came back with the markers in it that it had the antibodies for celiac. And I was like, wow. Oh, like that to me was the best case scenario, obviously. And also something that didn't seem that scary to me because my husband with his migraines has been gluten-free since like freshman year of college. So he's been eating gluten-free at that point for like almost 10 years. And yeah, like I would split gluten-free things with him at restaurants. And I mean, I definitely was not gluten-free myself, but I saw that he was fine with it. Yeah. So, and immediately being told that I have this, obviously you're not supposed to go gluten-free right away because you have to get an endoscopy to confirm it and you need to be eating gluten before you get that. But I like went in as soon as I could for that. They confirmed that it was celiac. And then I stopped eating gluten immediately after that test. And it took probably like a week before the migraines started getting less frequent. And then after 2 weeks, they were just totally gone. And simultaneously, the digestives, I actually didn't realize, but simultaneously my digestion was just getting so good. And I was like having the best, most solid bathroom patterns that I had ever had. And really looking back, I realized that I spent even when I was on the pill, like this was one issue that wasn't masked. I basically had diarrhea every day, at least once a day. And it was usually in the morning. Miserable, but it was, I literally just thought
like that was normal.
Is the morning cleaning out. Like that's, I know. And I was like, sometimes it happens after I had coffee. So I was like, maybe it's from coffee.
Right.
Or I would be blaming it on like, I had oatmeal this day and eggs this day. And I was trying to find patterns and there was no pattern. It was just happening every day. And I thought it was normal. I thought it was just like, that's my one poop of the day. So not right. And as soon as I cut out the gluten, not only did the migraines go away, but all of a sudden my digestion was like in perfect shape. I literally didn't have a loose stool for over a year until I ate dinner at like a C-rated ramen restaurant by accident and realized that I had food poisoning. But before that, it was like best digestion of my life for over a year. And that, I mean, I have so many thoughts about the pill because it's like such a complicated topic. On the one hand, it's such an amazing thing that women can have and it helps in so many ways. And obviously there are people that if they're not on the pill, they're in immense pain from some issue. So there's no way to put a blanket statement on the pill being good or bad. But it just goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of it not really...
Yeah, being like this informed decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not given all the details about what this could be doing or masking or hurting. And we just take it because our biggest concern is getting pregnant. And then we all come off the pill when we want to get pregnant and have to deal with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that like migraines were so real. It's like your body is trying to give you all these messages and warning signs like something's wrong. And if you just treat the symptoms of a migraine, then you like would be missing this other thing. That's all the time. So I'm thinking like, what is my migraine trying to tell me? Yeah. And I don't freaking know what it's trying to tell. Like, it's trying to tell me something.
Now I'm thinking like, do you have celiac?
Oh my God, I know. I'm like, I think I need to go get like
I think you need to go get a celiac
but
workup.
I really like my gluten.
I know. It'd be tough.
Bagel is my thing. I know.
It is hard because when you have, at least in my husband's case, like I've gone through all those ups and downs of when he has a migraine and he gets them multiple times in a month. I can't help but think, what are you doing wrong that's causing this? Like, are you not drinking enough water? Are you not sleeping well? Do you need to meditate? He doesn't eat gluten already, but is it something else you're eating? And that's where it's kind of hard for me because I know that like in some cases, there's really not an easy answer like that.
Right. Yeah. I don't get them when I'm pregnant really. So it's like, I know my hormone. Like I just got the first one in 6 months because I just had a baby. And it's just so interesting. But I feel like our bodies tell us things and then you know, doctors are like, let's treat symptoms. And that's like not always the best way.
I mean, even in my case, right? Yeah. It's like I went in with arm numbness and tingling, and my doctor's like, you have a pinched nerve. Go do physical therapy. Like,
yep.
You know, and it's like totally missed the boat on something
like completely
pretty big.
Right. You know? A pretty big deal.
Yeah. But I think that just like emphasizes, like, it makes me feel sad that we have to be such diligent advocates as patients when like we are entrusting our doctors to like paint us a full picture. And yeah, it's just, I guess, disappointing, you know, that like, and you're feeling the grief of that. Like, now I made this decision because it was all the information I had, and it's probably the best decision you could have made at the time with the information that you had, right?
Yeah.
But looking back on it, it's like hard to not feel sad that you weren't given an opportunity to explore some other options and potentially keep that part of yourself, even if it's not essential.
And, you know, it also works the other way too. Like, it's worth calling out that sometimes someone has a real medical issue that needs surgery or needs medical attention, and it's equally as not helpful when people kind of come at it with more of these holistic ways of looking at things. Like, a perfect example is my sister recently has been going through this immense neck pain, and it's been like radiating down, and she can't turn her head. And the amount of people that have kind of said to her, like, you're probably just stressed because your wedding is coming up. Like, her wedding was in December, and she really had this big acute attack before her wedding. And they were like, it must be the wedding jitters, or, you know, she had a year before gone through a breakup, and it was like, maybe you have like unprocessed trauma from
like
your
so
breakup. It's like in your neck. I'm not that doctors told her that, but like people were like, you're just getting worked up. Your stress is making it worse. Lo and behold, she goes and gets a scan, and her disc is literally like pushing into her spinal cord.
Oh my gosh.
And she needs surgery. And it's like, when it's equal, I don't know. I just feel like it goes both ways, where sometimes there is a medical thing that needs addressing and we can't minimize that. But then other times we way overblow these medical things when it is, in fact, a lifestyle fix, or it needs some deeper looking and unpacking.
I feel like it's about balance.
Yeah.
You know, like having both perspectives. And I feel like when people dismiss something as like stress or whatever, it can feel really frustrating to, like, I know my brother's been going through his own medical stuff, and he's had a lot of people telling him that it's just anxiety or just stress, and it can feel so minimizing when you feel so terrible. And just makes you feel really alone and like unheard in your experience. And so I think, it's good to get second opinions, and anyone listening to this, I would encourage that. Like, just because you go to one doctor doesn't mean that that's the doctor. You can always seek out other opinions and like find people that are aligned with like what you're looking for. And it sounds like as you've gone through this journey, you've sort of figured out what it is that you're looking for from a provider.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, it's hard to. I remember when I was living in New York, I've had bunion surgery, and I went to this doctor in New York, and he's like, you need to get those bunions out, and didn't like really help me walk through the fact that I lived in Brooklyn and worked in the Bronx and would need to take the subway 50 minutes every day, and was literally going to put me through foot surgery living in New York City, and like right before my wedding too. And I'm just,
oh gosh,
like nothing holistic would have saved me in that moment. But again, like the informed consent.
That's part of it, right? Is being like, this maybe doesn't match up with the quality of life that you're trying to have in the next 6 months. Like, let's push it back. Like,
yes,
you know, like again, the balance.
Yeah.
There.
And on that note, like with my sister's spine stuff, she got confirmation that it was not all in her head, but her wedding was coming up and she didn't want to have a scar on her neck right before it. And they were like, okay, here's an alternative, non-invasive thing we can do first, because this is the first line of defense before a surgery. And it was like some sort of steroid injection that actually helped and made things better for a good 6 months. And now here we are. Now it's April and she's like getting the surgery next week. So
yeah.
And that's just like looking at the patient as like more than just a patient, right? It's like the whole person, like taking into account what's happening in their life, how active they are, like all of those things. And I feel like sometimes it can probably become easy as a provider to just like see the problem and then want to fix it.
Yes.
But you don't.
And I don't blame them. Like when you are in an office where all you see all day is people coming in with problems and there are, quote, easy fixes for things or things that you know are going to solve the problem versus sending them on a 6-month journey to see if maybe these lifestyle changes can improve it. I mean, I get it. It's just unfortunate that that's the way it all works.
Yeah.
I think it's just like humanizing it a little bit more, you know? Like I was sharing with Erica, someone had reached out to me that's a physician's assistant and was saying like, hey, I saw one of your videos and I read MRIs all day long and like deliver the results to patients. And it can become so robotic. And I'm not even like thinking about what I'm saying or like how that person's receiving it. And like seeing your video and your reaction to like having to wait for the MRI and then like having to wait for the results, like it just reminded me that like this is a huge part of this person's day. And like I just think like everyone needs that reminder. Like even if it becomes your status quo, it's like a way to sort of remember that like the other person sitting across from you is just a human who's going through something tough.
Definitely. 100%. That's a good reminder for everyone in every field, everywhere.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, what would you tell Lucie then when you were going to that doctor appointment, like the day before you got surgery? Like, what would you tell yourself then with the information you know now?
I really feel like it would be hard to give myself all the information that I know now or, you know, listen to these hours and hours of podcasts before and see if you're inspired. The unfortunate truth is that you as the person and the patient have to be on board with the alternative ideas. Like I don't think that a lot of these alternative holistic healing modalities are necessarily going to work on someone who feels like it's bullshit. Like a lot of it is a whole picture where like your body and mind and everything about your thought patterns and your anxiety levels and like everything just needs to be with it in order for that to be really successful. Even like with acupuncture, which I get a decent amount of both for sinuses and I was getting it for pregnancy nausea. Like I know there is science behind it, but I definitely feel like there's some placebo effect with a decent amount of this stuff that I'm happy that it potentially helped me for a few days feel less nauseous because I knew I went to acupuncture and I knew that that was supposed to help. And so whatever the reason is, it's like I almost would have just told myself, you know, you're not going to die in the next day if you don't get this procedure. You know, I would try to give myself a talk of relax, you know, you have time. I would tell myself the things that the doctors didn't tell me of, this is not like an urgent, pressing emergency surgery. You're not traveling anywhere major in the next 6 months, so you don't need to rush into this preemptively. Take a little bit of time, do a little bit of research, see if anything you possibly do can make things better. You know, measure the length of the stones and see if they're getting smaller after you do these things. And if not, you always have this as a backup option and you're going to be okay no matter what route you choose. But it doesn't need to just be like immediate snap decision. This is my only hope and my only path.
Totally. Right. If only we knew then what we know now would be so helpful.
Jordy, would you like, not that you've done any, you know, drastic bad decisions, but if you could go back to when you first got diagnosed, even though it's not like you've made bad irreversible decisions to this point, but if you just knowing what you know now and how you've processed it and how you feel now, what would you tell Jordy like that first day in the hospital when her world was just flipped?
I love how you switched this on Jordy.
I know.
I want to know.
I know. I think I've thought about this. I think it's just like that two things. One, like, thank you for listening to your body. And for, even though I didn't think there was something so very wrong, for not dismissing it. I think as women, as mothers, it's really easy to like not prioritize ourselves and our health and like just sort of like keep going and pushing through. So thank you to that version of me that was like, no, this doesn't feel right. Let's go to the hospital. But also to not worry so much about the stuff that I can't control, you know? Like I spent so much time between like getting the tumor out and like getting the actual diagnosis, just like hoping and praying and wishing for it to be different, that I just wish I hadn't spent so much time focused on something that was already predetermined, you know? And it's like I mentioned on your podcast, I'm not like a religious or spiritual person, and I appreciate prayers when they're coming my way, but I don't really believe that I have the ability to like change what already is. And so I wish that instead I had just focused more on how can I be present and how can I, like, what will I do if I do get my worst case scenario? You know, like how can I prepare myself for getting not great news? And just not focusing so much on the things that I can't control, because up until this point, I've spent a lot of time trying to control things that are not in my control. And I don't like that. But yeah, that's probably what I would tell myself.
I almost wish that Jordy could see this Jordy of just, she's got a podcast. She's all over this, you know, social media, making content.
Right.
She's a
so weird.
Person.
So out of
that Jordy would not have believed.
No, like Erica can attest to this. Like I hated going to like even therapist networking events.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I don't like small talk. I like therapy and my job because we get to go deep. That's like why I enjoy it.
Oh, yeah, Jordy would be at parties like going to the dogs.
Yeah, I'm like chilling with the dogs at the parties. Like I'm definitely more of like an extroverted introvert, I guess.
And look at you now.
And and now I've just sort of like really pushed through that, and I'm doing the things because why not?
Yeah.
Well, Lucie, thank you so much for joining us on Grief Street.
Thank you too so much.
Honored. We loved having you. We can listen to the Real Stuff podcast on Apple, Spotify, everywhere.
Yes, it's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube if you want the video version. And on social media, there's at The Real Stuff Pod. There's also my handle at Lucie B. Fink, spelled with Lucie. And yeah, I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm in all the places, but I'm in most of the video-centric places.
You're in all the places. So
Instagram, TikTok.
We'll make sure to include all of your handles below. Thank you again for just being vulnerable and being willing to dive into the not so fun topic of grief and death.
Thank you both for having me. I'm really excited to listen to this podcast. This is such a great one.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Okay, so this episode, we hope you enjoyed hearing more about someone who is very front-facing in her life and shares a lot on social media, but obviously for many reasons doesn't share about her death anxiety.
I mean, that's, But I think what I learned from being on her episode and then having her come on is like, these are the kinds of conversations she wants to be having more of. And I appreciate someone who is like more of a public figure and like there are a lot of people following her, that she wants to like sort of talk about these taboo topics and have more in-depth, interesting conversations. And so I liked this episode a lot because I could totally relate as a kid. I had like intense death anxiety, and like I was always fearful about death and people around me dying, and just thought about it a lot. And the unknown of it really scared me.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
That's like why I used to like not like to get high and stuff, because then I would just question the world and have these like crazy existential thoughts. And it's just crazy that as you get older, and Lucy touches on this in the episode, you lose people in your life, and then you maybe go through your own experience of grief and loss and death, that it becomes a lot less of a foreign concept. And it's not a thing that we can escape. And so it's like the more that we can be sort of in acceptance of that, I think the less scary it becomes.
For sure. And also like being faced with it in your current life.
I can't ignore it.
And no one can escape from it.
Right.
But it's interesting because in therapy, I actually work with a lot of kids mostly who have an intense fear of death. And it's usually related to OCD or anxiety. And so I'm actually doing exposures with people all day long around fears of death.
And what kind of exposures? Like give an example to our listeners of
what kind of exposures?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of OCD, like I can put together like one person with many different fears to not, divulge patient information.
Of course. No,
but someone would say like, I feel like I have to like touch the floor 5 times or else my mom is going to die. And if I say it out loud, then it means that's more likely going to happen. And so it's become this like a very privatized experience around the death anxiety piece and not wanting to talk about it. And someone else has like a parent who died. And so there's this like constant fear of like sleeping alone or going to school. And it looks like separation anxiety. But when you look at the underlying core, it's really the fear of being away from their parents and thinking if they're not with their parents that they'll die.
Will happen, yeah.
But it's like, okay, and even if, sorry, I thought that was Darby peeing.
Oh, I think it was the wind.
It was the wind. Even if that is the case, it's like, then your whole life would stop. If you have to be with a parent 24/7.
Right.
You have school to go to, you have activities. So a lot of it is around, okay, let's do a little like behavioral experiment. Let's have you, instead of tapping the floor 4 times, try 2 times or 10 times or something to do little experiments. And then you can't check on your mom for the next hour because that's what you think is going to happen. And as you can imagine, for a kid who has OCD around that, really challenging. But then they're able to like live their life. And there's some truth to it. Yeah. We can't ever say like, okay, your parent or your friend or whoever you're worried about like won't die.
Right. There's no guarantee of that.
Yeah. And they will at some point, but likely what's happening here can be challenged.
Right. It's like untying the behavior from that idea.
Right. Yeah. Like you're not preventing death by tapping the floor 4 times.
Right. If only
I would tap the hell out of this wood floor.
Same.
If we were that powerful.
Yeah, if only that would be something. But yeah, I think it was interesting. And like I said at the beginning, we chatted about the patient advocacy piece too. And I know that like, especially right now for me, I'm like in the thick of it. Yeah. And obviously it's different. It's actually more similar this time around for me to Lucy's experience than my first time around, because the first time around it was very obvious.
What do you mean first time around? First time around with what?
My brain cancer.
Versus what?
Like this potential.
This
potential recurrence.
Oh, I didn't know what. Okay, because you're saying it as if like
I'm not. No. Like we don't know. It's uncertain. But the first time that like I went to the ER, it was very obvious what I had. There was no ifs, ands, or buts around like what.
You also had no idea what to advocate for at that point. Like there was...
Oh, of course not. Yeah. I had no idea that like you could get into clinical trials and all of these things. They were just like, we need to take this out. There's a lot of swelling. It's not okay. We need to take this out. And I didn't question it. Just like Lucy didn't question when they were like, okay, we got to remove it. Yeah. I want this pain gone. Let's come in tomorrow. Now, obviously, I have a lot more experience. I have been through it before and I know the kinds of questions to ask. Right. And I'm in a community of people who are going through it as well. So I can kind of check in with them and find out who are the best doctors. What should I ask for? I mean, this even happened in my appointment. When was it? Tuesday? Like my doctor said like surgery could be on the table. And I'm like, is there something less invasive?
Oh, right.
And he was like, well, like there is a blood test you can do, but we don't really do it here. And it's like, if I hadn't asked for that, I wouldn't have just gotten my blood drawn today and been doing this blood test. And again, there's no like silver bullet here that's going to give me all the answers or give me 100% certainty. But I had to advocate to get more information in a less invasive way.
Totally. I mean, also, even with that, second and third opinions, you got another opinion from a doctor and you heard that you have a completely different opinion.
Yeah.
And so the patient advocacy thing is, it's just like so important to be able to make choices. And then there are sometimes limiting factors of why you won't be able to advocate as much. And yeah, I think Lucie highlighted that.
Yeah, I think she highlights that. And I also think like that's one of the reasons why I started posting online as well, is like just to encourage people to like be proactive and to be their own best advocate, and to not just go with whatever the doctor says. Like I think you can find a balance of not doing a ton of research that's like researching every single possibility, and also not doing zero research. You can do a balance and be able to take your own perspective and like your information that you've gathered and then a doctor's opinion into consideration when making an important decision.
Exactly. So if you'd like to follow Lucie on Instagram, you can find her at Lucie B. Fink, and we will include her Instagram and her website in the comments in case any of you want to do some content creating or work one-on-one with her.
And if anyone has any like interesting stories, she has a whole podcast called The Real Stuff about she pretty much explores the 3 topics of sex, money, and mental health. And so if anyone is interested in being on her podcast, you can go to her website and apply to be a guest on her podcast. She does audience caller episodes just like the one that I was on. And so we really appreciate you, Lucie. It was so lovely to meet you.
It really was.
Virtually and in person. And thank you for inspiring me and, you know, encouraging me to start posting online, because it's been really healing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Lucie. Appreciate you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Grief Street. We put out new episodes every Monday. If you'd like to support us, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to find the video version of our episodes. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a 5-star review. We would love to hear from you and get some feedback. If you'd like to contact us, please email griefstreetpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 508-474-3378. That's 508-GRIEFST. Our theme song is Hepcat Jive, courtesy of purpleplanet.com. We'll see you next time.